Okay, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to call the meeting to order. And first order of business, any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor Cox.
If we get to the grants today, I have a couple of them on the different organizations, Lions Club and the Shambo Art Club.
Member Burkett.
Excuse me, was there one? There's one for the Legion in it. Then I have conflict on that too.
Do you have? And then I have regarding grants for the Quarter Mill and the Match Dash Heritage Community Center. Anyone else? Okay, I have nothing in the consent agenda. The adoption of the regular agenda. Oh, sorry, member. Allison, is that typical?
I'm just on that. I'll say it anyway.
Yeah, I think it's so doctors recruitment. And just speaking for member Jansen, whether sorry, Chamber of Commerce in Georgian Bay, I would speak on your behalf. But Georgian Bay, I would. Okay, so we have all that. So then I'm going to call a motion to move the regular agenda. If Allison can read the motion.
Motion reads that the agenda be adopted as circulated.
We have a mover on that. Moved by member McIntyre, second by member Jansen. All in favor? It's carried. Now we'll go for section E. I'll ask our Director of Finance Treasurer, Mr. Plunkett, to guide us through the budget presentation. And is it going to be on the overhead? Okay, great. So good morning, Mr. Plunkett, and the rest of the crew there. And I'll turn up my mic off.
Good morning, Council. Today we're going to start the budget deliberations. We'll start off with a brief presentation to overview some of the pressures and highlights for the 2023 budget. If anybody has any questions, feel free to stop me when we're going, but just stop, answer the questions and move on. Our goal this morning, for sure, is to get through the presentation, get through grants as well if we can. And if we do have any time left before we finish up this morning, we can probably look at the administration, operations, and capital. I don't know if we get much further than that today, but we should be able to get at least that much done this morning. And as I said, if you have any questions, feel free to stop me along the way. So when we developed the budget, certainly over the last 4 years, and that includes this year as well, we were taking into consideration the priority objectives of our previous strategic plan. And I know this budget, because it was done before your latest strategic planning session, took those values and principles in mind. If we do need to make any changes as a result of that, we can do that during the deliberations today and tomorrow. This particular page just reminds us of the infrastructure deficit, the one that when AMO came out a few years back and said we needed to increase, or the average municipality would need to increase taxes by 8.9% a year for 10 years to put us in a position where we were no longer in an infrastructure deficit. Luckily for Severn, that number was closer to 2.4% a year for 10 years. So I would say we're in a much better position than maybe the average municipality, and council has over the last few years done exactly that. They've increased the capital portion of our levy so that we can reach a position where we are on our way to being sustainable, especially for asset replacement in the future. And this budget also includes an amount to continue to do that. And before we move on to this particular page, we did say that our water and wastewater plan, we were going to need to increase rates by 4% a year for 15 years, I believe. We've been doing that as well. That came from both our water rate study and our asset page. We do the rate study one is for rate related assets, so water and sewer related assets. That's 4% effectively for 15 years to get us to a position where we're sustainable. And all the other infrastructure assets, which are tax-based driven, that's where the 2.4%. The 2022 year-end position. Normally when we complete year-end, which for us will be about a month from now, we actually bring whether there's been a surplus or a deficit for Severn, and we usually bring it to council and let you know we'll transfer those amounts to reserves. And when we're in a position to do so, council can direct where they want those reserve funds or surplus funds to go.
Thank you through the chair to Mr. Plunkett. I have the two questions based on the slide so far. So just wondering what council did, since this is my first time through this process on council, what council did in 2021 to address the deficit. And then my second question is that the rates that you proposed as far as increases, although lower than what you must suggested, these rates are higher than the cost of living and inflation, wage rate increases, etc. So I just wanted to speak to
Like that, I do agree that there's a pretty good chance that that capital levy increase would typically be higher than inflation. I would say right now it's not higher than inflation. Inflation control. But we did know that, and I guess I would suggest that the province knew it, and they suggested we need to start doing something about our infrastructure deficit because it was going to get considerably worse. In 2021, council adopted the asset management plan, which in it suggested that we were going to need to increase the tax levy by 2.4% for several years in order to get it to that position. There was a slide we had in previous, I haven't put it into this particular one because we started to address the asset management issue, but it showed what was going to happen if we did not start putting that money away for the assets in it. It showed us, I believe, by 2034 being in $100 million deficit on assets alone. It would not have been sustainable. We need to be able to replace our roadways and our bridges, some of the major assets, sure. And if we didn't have the funds to do so, we would have been looking at like the astronomical tax increases at that time, just in order to be for as much as I'd like to keep the tax rate as low as possible. In my mind, smoothing it over time is a little better than taking a really big hit on it. So you can stay there for a second. So we will once we've got the year-end surplus numbers going. We're still waiting for invoices to come in for 2022 still. Once we have the year-end completed, I'll bring a report back to council with the surplus. If we've generated surplus, I want to anticipate we've still generated surplus for 2022. if we have, we can transfer those surplus to reserves at that time. So the next slide, it gives you some of the global pressures that all municipalities are currently dealing with, which is, unfortunately causing significant price increases, especially for capital and some of our operating costs. That is the impact of the COVID-19, unfortunately, the global economy has done to our supply chains. It certainly has not recovered, and the current situation with the war in Ukraine just added to the COVID-19 supply chain issues. Inflation, we all know, is I guess starting to come down, but for 2022 in Ontario it was still 7.1. And the construction price index, which really lets you know how much more our infrastructure costs are, that inflation rate for 2022 was 20.2. So these items are the 2023 budget pressures. So they are the numbers that have effectively made up the increase in the levy that we require for this year. And these are I would argue, the major issues that we probably want to look at, well, during deliberation. And that first one is, we've been continuing to increase our contribution to the capital reserve for asset management. And we've done, I believe, in the last 4 years, 1.3 million. So there's an additional 300,000 for this year to get us to 1.6. We are definitely creeping up on becoming sustainable. And I would say we're probably, if inflation gets under control, we are probably halfway there from the capital levy standpoint already, which is, I would say, is quite respectable, because those increases won't have to continue forever. We have a levy increase impact on recreation this year of 103,000. Roads operations, the increase for this year is 807,000. 2% cost of living generation increase for the year is 106,000. As part of our 5-year staffing plan, there is a new fire training officer for 2023. That cost with salary and benefits is 94,000. A new new building permit coordinator, the same, the salary and benefits of 80,000. New seasonal municipal law enforcement officer, and again, this is, I believe, with an 8-month position we're looking for, and that's salary and benefits as well. We are hoping we have the return of the program coordinator for recreation. That is $32,000. Oddly enough, even though I would say our economy's not been doing great, we have a reduction in our tax rates, which means our residents have been able to pay the tax bills maybe better than they have been in the past. So the next line is some of the highlights we'll give for the 2023 budget, and one of those is assessment growth has generated of the need that we need this year, which is a little over $1 million. Assessment growth has covered 142,000. We are hoping that the growth in West Shore and in Coldwater, we will start seeing the assessment impacts. We do the annual assessment roll, and we'll actually see a lot more revenue than simply 142,000.
Member Cox.
Okay, on that one, that's the impact, right? So when is impact going to reassess again? I've heard different.
That's a good question. The assessment itself doesn't impact our tax. What matters is the growth added to it, and that growth is new houses. If I agree the assessment needs to happen, so it brings more parity across the board, but it won't change. Ultimately, it doesn't change how much tax revenue we generate. It's simply growth added to that does. I would suspect by 2024 we'll see impact have new assessed values across the board, and all that will simply do is it'll reduce our tax rate, but not necessarily everybody's tax bills because their assessed value will have gone up.
And supplemental, then that would affect these growth impact increase.
May or may not. I guess ultimately higher assessment helps. It's the higher the assessment, but then if the tax rate's lower, it's still going to be similar. Really, it's the number of houses that we need
Right.
to impact the assessment. If they build 200 houses instead of 80, for example, then that number would double. Next on the next line there is the Ontario Municipal Grant, which is funding for 2022. It was 1.43 million. This year 1.7. So it is a little bit lower than last year, but we do continue to receive those funds. We reinvest those funds in capital on an annual basis. There are some municipalities that use it to keep their taxes lower. The funding of that nature. Funding of that nature isn't guaranteed. So it is provincial funding that we do receive, and we have been receiving it annually for several years. There was a point in time where they suggested that they were going to start applying it back. It hasn't happened yet, but council's decision certainly has been to transfer it to reserves for capital purposes, so that the loss of it doesn't impact the in a single year. Now you notice on here we have interest revenue, which is, I will argue, is significantly higher than has been in the past. This is based on the actuals we've been receiving, certainly in the last half of 2022. I think last year we only had 300,000 approximately that number, and this year 1.3. So it is helping. It's helping immensely. It's helping us finding the increasing costs for the stuff here. It is a direct result of the increase in interest rates. As much as many of us are more sure the majority of the population is happy with the rate increases, it is helping municipality generate more.
Sorry. How do we invest the monies that we have? Do you look after it? Or what do you look for? I'm just curious.
The money that we currently have is just generating data. That is all we generate. This year we're anticipating we'll generate.
Oh, okay. I was going to say,
no, last year it's, let's say the number is probably close to 600,000 off the top of my head, and that all happened. Then the majority of that happened in 3 or 4 months a year.
well, supplementary to the chair, if I may, I know that we talked about possibly if we're allowed to invest half of it, maybe a higher risk investment. Is that something we may entertain or not?
It is definitely something we will consider to look at in entertain the future. There is an ability to generate interest in one investment program, and they are beginning to allow more riskier investments in municipalities, which they have typically denied in the past. Understandably so. You wouldn't want to put a great deal of risk on it, residents' money, but they do have. We may be able to, I would suggest right now the bank, which is pretty solid, but it won't continue. So we will consider the one investment program. I don't know if we'll get them in to see you this year, but if we can, we would mind having them to come in to tell council what it is that they can offer us. consider whether we start investing. We are gonna start generating more reserve funds. And the more revenue we can generate, the less impact that would be on this.
No, it's okay. I was just thinking of that one program that we'd gone to down in Amo and we came back and I think that was called the One Program. Is that what it is? Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Administration capital, the request for this year, and we'll go through the details. Go through the administration budget, but it's at 220,000. I do believe that the majority of that would be paid for out of reserve accounts, directly related to administration capital. We do have the second year of our contribution to the Mariposa House Hospice of $25,000. Fire capital for 2023, $881,500. And we do the majority of that is still covered by reserve transfers, but we do have continuing to do so with 150,000 from the levy, paid for fire capital. Leasing costs, knock on wood, only increased by $6,000 in 2023. Federal gas tax funding has gone up from 427,000 to 446,000. It's nice to know that we're still getting OCIF funding, which is more provincial funding for our infrastructure. Last year was 785,000. The amount for 2023 is 903,000. Just a couple of years ago, that was only 350,000. 5 years ago, it was zero. So it does help us immensely. The building department, there's a new vehicle requested for at 45,000.
Go ahead, Member Burkett.
Through the chair to Andrew, did we look at an electric vehicle or no? I know that they're hard to get, but is that something, and it's probably more money as well, but.
Electric vehicle.
I don't know how the others feel, but everyone else seems to be going green, but I'm just curious, because I know the price of it would probably be a lot more than maybe this preferred would have. Have you looked at it there? Sorry.
Thank you. And yeah, so the fleet management strategy for the township hasn't been geared towards electric at this time, but that is something we're going to be chasing as part of our greenhouse gas reduction climate action plan that we had developed with SSEA to look at. One of the components was to look at a fleet management strategy that include electrification.
Member Cox.
Would it not be better to be looking at a hybrid? Because trying to find someone to fix or anyway, hybrid seems to be a more like we can find more of them or ease into it.
Through the chair, certainly electrification includes hybrid as one of the options. And for a note, we actually have one fleet asset that is a hybrid unit, and it certainly gets great gas.
And supplemental, that's also with the new EV grant program that's out again. So if I'm hoping we're looking at that too for a climate action plan. Thank you.
So more highlights. You will see on here we have roads department projects of $9,270,000. One of those is there's a very large project on there, which is the line culvert. 3.5 million at this point. So we will get into the details. There are a few items that did not get completed in the 2022 year, which we have to carry over to 2023, and they are not reflected, but we will let you know what they are when we do the budget deliberations when we get to those capital items. That will likely be tomorrow because there is I'm aware of that are administration side, but we probably not going to get much today. Roads equipment continuing to replace on a revolving schedule some of our roads equipment, which is 650,000. There are sidewalks proposed for 2023 of 250,000. Water and sewer capital reinvestment of 2,046,000. Our SSEA, which is I'm just trying to blank study, even though Derek just said it. But it is our climate consultant. They look after our waterways, are helping us with our climate action plan, and our contribution to them this year is 118,604. It's only marginally higher than it was last year. The Lake Country, which does economic development for us, includes some cost share and pay-to-play items, which is digital marketing and the Tap into Maple program. They've asked for 22,500. Position recruitment is their ask is for 20,000. The Recreation Department capital, 2,564,000 total. Again, planning consultants to help with move some of our planning items forward with 100,000. Official plan review is continuing, but there's about 30,000 left. And the library budget, which this year 215,990.
Go ahead, Member Cox.
Yeah, with that official plan, so we came in under budget?
Sorry, trying to work the mic there. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Member Cox. So certainly the official plan portion of the township's review and adoption did come in under budget. The consultant took us to council's adoption. The next step in the $30,000 is for the county approval process, which includes some of the MCR review and those components.
Thank you.
Mike was off, sorry. So this is the additional money that we need to run the municipal operations for 2023. You'll notice that it's 12,660,000. Last year, 11,540,000. That is a 9.63% increase, generating a little over $1.1 million. The municipal component for operations and certainly some built-in capital investment there is 800,000, and the direct impact relating to the asset management component is 300,000. This page just outlines in chart form the areas or the departments where the greatest amount of money is spent, and then you'll notice that the biggest piece of that pie is certainly roads, streetlights. Streetlights are very small component of that roads. Component. Council and administration is another large piece. Each of the other are on there as well. Now this gets us to our estimated blended tax impact. The blended tax impact takes into consideration the county's tax increase, the school board's tax rates for the year, the municipal component, and our police. And for the proposed budget in front of you is including a 4.55% tax increase for 2023 to accomplish what we need to do for 2023. And I know someone likely has a question on the 2023 average single family home, and that's fair. That's not the average market value. Right now, that is the average impact assessed value for Severn Township. And because they haven't changed, they haven't reassessed any properties in, I guess now almost 2 full cycles, that number is just not going to. That particular number, unless you're an anomaly, is not impacted. So this just breaks down how we get to that 4.55%. So the combined municipal and policing impact is 6.79%. The county's rate of 3.5 and the school board's rate holding steady is what allows us to pull ourselves the blended tax rate down to 4.5. So the municipal component, so ignoring the policing impact, the municipal side is 8.29%. The policing component is 50.99% increase. Sorry, I probably went through those pages a bit quick. I can hear everybody flipping the pages. So the next page is the 2023 water and sewer rates. And it is showing that the increase in the water rates is 3.5%. The increase in the sewer rates is 4.5%. That is based on our water rate study. That is based on the asset management plan as well. And those are the rates adopted by council when we get their water and sewer rate study. I want to say it was probably 2020. That's a problem.
Andrew, we got a question from member Bennings here.
Hi, thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Plunkett, so on page 14, the page talks about combined municipal and policing. And then the next two pages, one is municipal and the other one is policing. But they each have a percentage increase or decrease. Can you help me understand those 3 pages? Because when I look at it, the math doesn't work. Okay, thank you.
It's fair. If the math doesn't work, it does work. It appears like it doesn't work. Trust me. The 0.99 is just simply how much the policing levy component has increased, and the 8.29. That is how much the municipal has increased. But when you combine the two, because they're not equals, so the municipal amount is, I'll say, 12 million. The policing amount is 2 million. And so the ratio of the two. So if I say the policing one went up by 1%, that 1% is on 2 million. But if the council one, it's gone up by 8%, it's on 12. So the numbers are much higher. Yeah, the ratios just don't match. But the combined impact of the two was the 6.79% overall.
Yeah, through the chair too. So if you had to do a press release after this meeting, after this budget, then what is the number you're going to talk about to our residents?
The number that I would talk about to the residents, because that's the one that they're going to pay, is 4.55.
Thank you. Okay.
Member Jansen has a question.
Chair Andrew, I have been receiving a feedback about our water rates, and I'm just wondering how they compare to.
I will defer that to Mr. Burke. He's got, I believe he has seen that end.
Thank you, through the chair. The water rates for Severn, water and wastewater rates for Severn are comparable to similar other smaller rural municipalities in our area and in Ontario. We certainly do trend on the higher scheme of things in the county of Simcoe. Generally speaking, our rates are probably 1 in the 3rd highest in that county or in our county. We operate 6 water systems and 3 wastewater systems of sort of very relatively small to medium size.
So up next is the estimated reserve balances, for 2023. I can't read from I'll just flip to the page.
While you're looking, Member Cox has a question.
And when you do these, can you explain the difference for our new members, what the difference between a reserve and a reserve fund when we go to them? Because that can be confusing.
I will.
Thank you.
And as of today, really, reserve and reserve funds might as well be the same. It did matter in the past, but once we've switched to different financial accounting rules, we no longer use fund accounting. We keep track of these simply for your purposes and for our use, but they're really reported on the financial statement as surplus. We do still refer to ones that are obligatory, so we can only spend them on certain items. The rest are, the rest of them are council discretionary, but the ones that we are regulated, like the federal gas tax fund, the development charges fund, the part-time fund. So those ones we can only spend them on.
Yeah, Member Minnings.
Thank you through the chair, to Mr. Plunkett. So sort of supplemental to, Member Jansen's question around the water rates. On slide 17, you speak to the minimum water rate per unit, minimum sewer rate per unit, etc. Is there a maximum rate? So it's my understanding that everyone in Severn is paying the same water rate quarterly, the base rate. And if that's the case, I'm just wondering why you use minimum in there and not just say the water rate per unit is and the sewer rate per unit is. Thank you.
No problem. That's a good question. The reason it's a minimum rate is regardless of how much water you use, even if you use very little, that is the rate you'll pay regardless. It is not the maximum. So we do, if you go over our, which is a 68 quarter, if you use that is so if you use more water than that in quarterly, you are charged additional surcharges on top of that. Well, it's actually not included on the pay, but they are. We do once you go over, you're charged at a higher rate, significantly higher rate. We've had a few unfortunate circumstances where that number has been significantly higher, but we make sure we collect it from those. Normally, you are able to collect it from the homeowners, so it's not doesn't become a burden on the other water wastewater users. Go back to our estimated reserve balances. It shows that we're the estimated starting point for 2023 is about 29 million. We are transferring a fair amount in and out of reserve, but we are transferring much more out of reserves for capital this year than we are transferring it. In fact, that will bring our estimated at the end of 2023, our reserve balance is down to 22 million. That would be a drop of 7.
Andrew, I have a question. When does the actual transfer happen? If you have a project you're going to do in 2022 and it doesn't happen, does the money go back to reserves or was it ever transferred in the first place?
It only gets transferred if we complete. So if we do not complete the project and that transfer was expected to happen, that transfer likely shows up in my surplus. So it'll show if we don't do the project, then the reserve balance doesn't fine. I think if you were looking at the 2022 estimated reserve balance, you would have saw that we expected to be down to 22 million, I believe, last year. But because some of those reserve funds weren't needed, they continue to carry forward in 2023. Does that answer your question? And if nobody else has any more questions on the reserve, that is the end of the presentation. If they have questions, great.
Chair. When we talk about this, the estimated balances in our reserves, is this the money that we're? So it is part of it. We do have fairly healthy balance as well. How many do it? Yeah.
Through the chair to Andrew, when you said healthy bank balance, where does it show up?
So it does not show up in the sheet. I believe we're looking at our financial statements, the amount of money that we have. Paper operation.
We get 5 million sitting there. On top of the 20.
Oh, absolutely. No, and we actually have, it's probably, maybe a slightly a little bit less than that, but that's somewhere between 34 and 36.
So supplementary, if I may, through the chair, so the 2.5 million that we have at the West Shore back here, is it part of your calculations when we have an estimated balance at the end of this year?
Yes, I just wondered about the 2.5.
Because it's the 2.5 is back here at the West Shore. I know that we're not going to slot it.
So there was an amount slotted for 2022. We did spend it.
We didn't spend 2.5. Yeah, record department was at 2.5, 2,564,000. I think that's for West Shore. Or is that part
Oh
of
no,
it?
that's all of recreation. That's not just the West Shore component. The West Shore component of that is.
Okay, member Cox.
I think that 2.5 was what we were talking about this morning. It was on one of the budget pages. Yeah. Andrew, when I'm looking at the capital reserve, so we're going to take 22.9 million out and transfer it to capital reserve. Right? Is that what we're doing? The very bottom. Going in, okay.
So it's going into the reserve, and that it is made up of the 1.6 million that we're the asset.
Okay.
It's also made up of the OPF funding of 1.
Okay.
So, and there's a couple of other.
And we're transferring 2.3 million to the capital fund.
So we're transferring 2.9 to capital
Yep.
reserve. We're, according to this, only transferring 2.3 out of our capital reserve, that needs to be for 2023 is actually growing.
What are we spending?
So the spending that's coming out of the capital is going to share 2.3.
That's what I thought. Okay. And that will show up all the way through, or is that something that's a big one that it's just on its own?
It's all of it.
Okay.
That'll be fine. Similar to if you had it right at the top of that page, you can see 3.2.
Yeah.
So that is the amount that we are anticipating spending from.
Okay, member Brennan.
Thank you. Through Chair to Andrew. I've talked briefly with you about this before, and I just wanted to verify. Does Bill 23 or any of the associated policies that are on the table now threaten in any way to redirect any of our reserve to things we don't want to direct?
Again, it's not Brennan. My understanding is certainly for 2023. Bill 23, but no financial impact. As for 2024, we are going to feel the impact there because there are items that are in our current study that we started. I really don't know if we're getting it. 2023, the impact should be I suspect 2024 starts back to that. And as our developers, they come to separate instead of $1 million home, they decide to that could have a major effect.
Thank you.
Sorry, I turned my mic off. I prevent you from being able to use it. The grant section will be the, I'm gonna say it's the second purple one.
Will you talk about the grants or does Allison speak to them?
I guess typically Allison is probably the one that tells you what's on which line, but I can do it the same. It doesn't matter. We'll just go through one at a time. Just going to get it up on the screen for you. Now, we do want to let you all know that when we were filling this out, we had missed the $1,500 that Paul had requested. The request is in there. It just didn't make the table sheet, so we've added it this year, or we have added it. It'll be on the screen. But it is a $1,500 request again for 2023, and it should have been there in your package.
Go ahead, Member Mennings. Yep.
Through the chair, before you get started, Andrew or Allison, it says 2023 grant requests and we're in January. So I'm assuming these requests came through last year and because we do have 2023 grants available. So could you just clarify what we're looking at before we start? Thank you.
So we do send out, it's fairly well known, it's also part of our grants policy that our grant applications are due by September 30th every year for budget, because we're normally doing budget in November in a normal year, so that they can get their money for the start of 2023. So these grant requests were all in by September 30th last year, so that we can put them into this year's budget, which is the normal cycle that operates for our grant policy. It's on our website, and just before probably August, around August 1st, I tend to send an email out to everyone that got one the year before and said, don't forget. So with the link to the website in case they've lost.
Okay, so I guess we'll go at the top and
I don't know if everybody can hear me, but my mic's now on again. The 27,200 that was at the bottom is the number that is included in your current calculations, so it is included in the 4.55% increase. $1,500 that we had missed, it is not. So just to let you know, that's where we're at. So I have included 27,200 of that. I believe our last year we had $20,000 budget, so it is increased by 7,200 and plus the additional 1,500.
Yeah, so typically what we do is we just work through it. There is a total budget amount at the bottom of your page that tells you sort of what you got to the lot. So the last year council had to adjust some grant requests to fit into that budgeted amount. So
We tend to just work from top to bottom, and I will put it in the table as we go, and when we're finished, you can see what the bottom number is. So, membership for B City, so they've put in the past, they've had 1 grant application for membership. This year they've put in 3. One's for the membership and 2 are project specific. So, council to tell me where you'd like to go. So the request for membership is 200.
I think that's a good thing for this to pay the membership for the B City because it is part of climate saver and we hadn't paid before, so I don't have a problem with the 200.
Maybe, Mr. Chair, if we could go through these and just have like a show of hands as we go through so that we know we have concurrence on each individual grant as we go. Okay, so 200 in for the membership.
I have our CAO would like to comment.
Thank you. I was just gonna say for the members, but we don't always get all the things that last, so don't feel bad cutting people back, or if they ask for 1,000 and you want to give them 250, you don't have to go with what they ask. And on the B City one, just specifically, if you're looking at projects, staff would recommend that we start Timberline Park. It's a bit of a trial. Just
Member Cox.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think let's do a trial one and we've already got it, he's cleared it up and I think it's already gone through our rec committee that we don't have a problem with them doing that.
So then, to follow that train of thought, the naturalized land along Cambrian Road, between Hampshire Mills and Comfort Line would be 0, and then we fund 500 for the pollinator garden at Timberline Park. Born to Read. So this is one that's come in the last couple of years. It's a literacy program. Last year, $200 was awarded. They're requesting 1,000.
Member Cox.
I had various people tell me that they were very grateful for the 2, so we gave them 5. I think that's great. It's to help children learn to read, parents to read to children and encourage them.
So 500 is being recommended. Is the committee okay with that?
Coldwater Agricultural Society. So 500 last year, 500 requested this year. That 500 again, 2023. I always feel like a bit like an auctioneer going through this. Sure. We will, okay, so that would be wonderful if you use your cards and then I have a visual. Okay, and just the CEO made a good point. We'll try and leave the ones that people have conflicts on till the end so that we can move through the rest right now. Coldwater Ball Hockey, 500, they didn't ask for any this year, so I'll just carry that as a 0. I don't believe anyone did anything with the same. So Coldwater Canadiana Museum, so last year was 7,000. They've asked for 7,300 this year. 7,000 is last year.
I would give them 7,000. My thoughts. Go ahead, member Minnings.
Yeah, so thank you. We are going a bit fast for me because it's, but yeah, with the 7,300 for the museum, when I'm reading in the application, how do you spend the money if granted? There's the sentence says, I would guess between 5 and 10,000. So I'm having a hard time just finding a middle ground number of 7,500 based on that. I think it's difficult for me to approve that amount of money when there are other amounts of money that are have more detail and information on them.
Go ahead, member McIntyre.
that, you see the line below that, remittings that their tax becomes 72.84, which I think is a slight increase. Perhaps that's what they're looking for, a few dollars more. I understand they raise their money on their own. This is just a hand up there looking for. I'd approve 7,300. So if you have common ground at a different number, I'll listen.
Thank you through the chair. Just to want to remember meetings, that's what we've done in past years, just to cover the costs. And I'm not sure if you've ever been to the museum, so hopefully on our road trip that we'll all be on, we'll buy it. It's quite a gift for the township of Severn to have it.
Go ahead, Member Cox.
And if you know, it's only 4,300 for the taxes. Because the county and the Board of Education doesn't, we told them that we would cover the municipal tax, not the county and the education.
Looking for direction as to where you want to live.
Chair, I think 7,300 is not out of line at all.
Member Meetings.
Yeah, based on what the others have shared, I would agree to, and I'll make the priority to visit.
7,300. Okay, and I'll go with 7,300. 7,300.
Georgian Bay Forever requested $5,000. You'll remember they came to council's delegation. So this is the first time we've received a request.
Member Cox.
Right, ladies. Right.
I just believe that what they're doing is a good cause.
And they actually had a presentation to council last year, and they're doing a lot of work in Matchash Bay, Water River, North River. Go ahead, Member McIntyre.
I just wondered if we're the only township that they're approaching for 5,000. Are they doing as we going into Tiny and Tay? Are there others, or are we the target for 5,000? Are there other townships that are handing over another 5,000?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
The CEO might be able to answer that.
I've had a lot of experience with Jordan Bay Forever. They ask townships, but they ask the townships for work with their townships. So I know Jordan Bay probably gets 15,000, but so I think they're looking for funding from us to do the work in that space. I don't think they're double dipping for sure.
Okay. Yeah, Member Jansen.
Yeah, I'm definitely supportive of the work that they're doing. What I see on the funding request page, that the amount that they're Jordan Bay Forever, it's captured as $5,000 on our.
If I have a response for Member Jansen. They had originally put in their grant request for 1,500, but then they came to council, did a presentation, and it had requested 5,000. That's why the original grant request.
Do we have something showing the new requested amount, like in writing? Because based on the grant application, it does say 1,500.
So we do, it's part of the delegation that they did, I can't remember exactly, but we can we did verify it to the delegation that they did.
Okay, Member Burkett, maybe you can comment.
Thank you through the chair. Rather than give them the 5,000, why don't we give them 1,500 and maybe see how they made out? Like actually go out and look at what they've done before and after. Like, I'm struggling with the 5,000 all at once.
You know, the only comment, I know that it's a large geographic area, Natchitoches Bay, when you think how big it is, plus going up the Coldwater River and part of North River, and I'm not sure. I'd be receptive with going on half of their current request. Member Jansen.
Chair, anybody that there are relying solely on volunteer.
We'll ask our CAO to comment. She knows.
Sorry, and the only, it's not related to. So, like, that's what
Thank you. Member Cox.
And I think in Tay Township this year, if they had it in the paper, the volunteers went out and people from the SSEA came and showed them how to do it and what they should do, how to look after it. But that was a whole volunteer thing that Shepard said.
Okay, so I think, go ahead, CAO.
Jordan Big Forever volunteer. What they use the money for, I think, is they rent. That's the right. It's friends. I don't know why I know so much about pragmatics, but we've talked about it a lot in Georgian Bay. Yeah.
Member Minnings. So do we have a consensus, Member McIntyre?
I have a sense that the 5,000 might be a bit strong, as Member Burkett mentioned initially. I think 1,500 is a little light. They did request that, but I recall their presentation to us. It was a pretty good presentation. I'd be in the $2,500 range. I think would be something to start with. And if we can get anybody to agree,
would you agree with? I think we've got an agreement on that. Yeah, great. So that's 2,500, Allison.
Okay, 2,500 it is. Then the Women's Institute for 250. They had it in 2022. They're requesting it again for 2023.
All in agreement with that one?
Okay.
Skip over that one.
We'll come back to that one. Sparrow Lake Historical Society, 650. 2022, they're only asking for 150 this year.
I think we're all in agreement with that.
VON, they're not asking for anything this year, but that does tend to be a coverage of their rental fees.
And we can speak to the Washego Garden Club.
Washego Garden Club.
Member McIntyre.
thank you, Chair. I think it's commendable on the art club in Washego, particularly their leader, Glenn Hutchins.
Okay, we're going to skip that one and go to the next one.
Yeah. The garden club.
We're going to come back.
I was commenting about the $800. They had 1,500. Now they're looking for 8. I'd agree that 8 would be good. And I thought it was commendable they'd reduce it.
Sorry, we're just on the garden club. We're going to come back and go through the ones that everyone had declarations on.
Okay.
Just after we get through the ones that are ones without declarations. So we're on the Washego Garden Club.
Member, did everyone agree with the 1,400? I think we have an agreement.
Okay, and then there was the county bursary program. I didn't know any members had.
Can you explain the red?
I can't explain the red actually because it doesn't need to be there. Other than it I'm not sure why we have to read it. It is only given in grant that the student from Severn applies for scholarship. And when you do so, leave the scholarship to $3,000 and our contribution is $1,000.
Would you comment?
Hold on. Try that.
Thank you through the chair. Thank you through the chair. So I sit on the bursary committee counting, and Mr. Plunkett is right. Last year there was applicants from several, so we did $8,000.
It is included.
So, at this point, we'll go back up to the Coldwater Legion, who actually hasn't asked for anything.
Ready to vote, yes.
And the Legion, yeah. So we have the Coldwater Legion. So while they have not requested. So then we have the Lions Club, which have requested special event grants. So, these are, let me just sleep through on this. So, for the Coldwater Lions Club, they've submitted, special event grants requests for 2,500 for the Santa Claus Parade and 2,500 for New Year's Eve. This is the 2023 New Year's Eve that's already happened, so.
Yeah, that was my question. I know why they came to council. Pass it. So is this,
No, so what council approved at the committee meeting was waiving the respective fees, and then any grant related request was referred to budget. So this is entirely for the council to decide upon. For new members, those that fall into the special events grant portion of our grants policy. So as these are first time requests, their request goes in at the full amount. In future years, you notice that there's a 100%, 75, 50, 25. So at a certain point every year, that's expected to go down by a certain amount.
Go ahead, member Bennings.
So, for Coldwater Lions Club, I understand that the New Year's event already happened and the amount requested on the table right now is 2,500. Is that correct? So if it's not approved,
It's up to
okay. And then the Santa Claus Parade, that's for next, like 2023 Santa Claus Parade?
double check. So,
And, I'm sorry. I don't see a sheet of paper in my binder for the Coldwater Santa Claus Parade, and perhaps it's
It should
just
be.
not seeing it. It's not at the end, or is it in a different order?
It's just, as we're going through it, we're going to have, it's going to be a budget again in October of this year, November for 2024.
Yeah.
So this should get back in line.
back in normal routine.
Right.
It's always a bit awkward when you're considering something that.
Yeah.
It's a little past date.
Well, just for the record, these two events are well attended in Coldwater and area, and they should be commended on what they do there. And so whether we start off at 2,500 or it should be less than that, but that's my thoughts. Go ahead, sorry to cut you off there.
Thank you. No, I didn't have the sheet in my binder, but I did just quickly read it, so thank you. Okay, and again, they put in a grant request, so I haven't seen it. Sorry, I'm just struggling because I didn't see the Santa Claus Parade request for Washago, for example, another community that had a Santa Claus Parade. And I know there are other communities too, so.
And my apology, Andrew just pulled the page up, but just, it's not tricky again. The event for this Santa Claus Parade was the 2022 Santa Claus Parade. So it is another event that has passed. So we're dealing with the 2023 just happened New Year's event and the last year Christmas Santa Claus Parade. So, but again, regardless of when these events happen, it is totally up to council as to what they choose to award or not. And going forward in the future, these amounts will, because of the way our grant policy works, will decrease anyways, so.
Go ahead, member Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. Can we just go up to the first page there, the red area, so people know, there's a contingency column. And, yeah, right there, but there's nothing allowed there. It just seems prudent to me that over the course of the year, we would want to have some sort of allocation for things worthwhile causes.
There we go. The contingency line was typically there, so we would have, we used to, it's only a couple years ago now, that we had 50,000, but even 60,000 on this particular grant or line item. And we would have requests for, say, 35,000 or so. So our contingency would have been the difference. Last year, we chose to reduce that grant amounts that we were giving out. And that contingency line would be okay, except we seem to be going over the typical amount that we would allot for grants. And that's why the new contingency line doesn't have a value. And certainly, you know, council wants us to build in a contingency amount so that we, and I'm not sure what our total will be. We may go through this now, and because we've, you know, we've reduced some of them. Right. Okay, so we could, I mean, we could increase the number there so that if there are other grant requests that come in during the year, we do have the council grants that we're doing, switching to the 30,000 for other events that organizations will put on. Special projects that they can do during the year, and council choose to use that particular component of funding for that purpose.
Your CAO has a comment.
I was gonna say, you don't want your contingency too high. A few years ago, we put in a grant process. Yeah, that's fairly. So that there's time of year that last we discussed during budget. If you don't have a process, what you'll find is every month some organization will have a great idea, and that takes a lot of time, which is why we. That being said, if somebody comes up with a fantastic thing, always reserves, and so you can always make different decisions, but we try and funnel these small organizations through a process, so you only have to do it once a year.
Okay, so what's the feeling with the committee, member Jansen?
I'm not sure if you did find the paper in your, okay, great, finder. Just to speak to both of the events, the Lions Club did put forward some numbers of the youth event. It was very well attended. The costs were quite a lot higher than what they're asking for. Not saying that they're asking for the whole event. I'd be in support of that. As well, the Santa Claus parade. It does sound like the Lions Club attempts to have the costs covered through a raffle. But in that past year, or in the previous year when they could not do it, that raffle to support families in need. It sounds like that's what we would. I can support that.
We have a agreement 2,500 for the Santa Claus, and I think we're all in agreement.
Okay. So that is then 2,500 for Santa Claus parade and 2,500 for New Year's Eve. Yeah, so this year's would be 75%. What is 75%?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
You beat the treasurer to the calculator. So it would, is it 1125 or 1250?
It's 11.
11. Thank you. So, and that would be them at that 70, again, going through that declining balance, that's the 75% calculation, so that's. Yeah, if you could let the other two back in, that would be lovely. It didn't bring our number over, so. Alright, that's. Judith, it can be, Judith is vice chair, so she can be.
Okay, I guess we're looking at Matchadash Hall and the mill, right? Well, what are mill?
Okay, hold on, Andrew's just fixing my table so I can give you a grant. So you're in the request. Okay, so we're now at the cold water mill.
Yes.
So, last year was the last year for their capital request, so we're just dealing with the request for the 1,500 per program.
Okay. How does everybody feel about this? In agreement? Okay, that's fine. Okay, then we go to Matchadash Hall,
Yeah, so then we.
Heritage Center.
So then we have the Matchadash Heritage Center.
Yeah,
which
and
was
is everybody
another
in agreement with that? Do you have a question?
one-
Member Jansen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that, it appears that they did not put in, a request for funding or,
They did, I apologize, that was a clerical error on our side, if you actually look at the sheet, the request is in your binder. For 1,500, we just missed it on the table, so apologies for that clerical error, but they're looking for a request for 1,500 for this year, which is the same as their prior. Okay, so I think that's the two for the chair, so we'll do that. Did we miss anyone's? Then we need to deal with the Wishigo Art Club, so Member Cox, if you. This is why we leave these ones to the end. Okay, so the only one left then is the Wishigo Art Club, and their request is for $800.
I think Member McIntyre had a comment on that.
Yeah, I'm just gonna stand by my comments. I thought it was pretty terrific that they reduced because they didn't have a need, and I thought that was, keep that in mind for if they ever really have a need for something in the future. I'm in agreement with their $800. I did have a question about whether, I couldn't get an answer from them about whether their insurance is so high when they use the Wishigo Community Center. Wouldn't they not be covered under us by that, or am I just in the dark on it? They have to have insurance to go into our facility. They go to the Lions Club and the Lions Club covers them. They have to have a certain amount of insurance. Maybe Derek can answer that.
Through the chair, so yeah, as a renter, we do require an insurance cert if you are an organization. And so they are an incorporated organization, and so they do provide an insurance cert. If you rent by hour, then our insurance covers you. We are looking into some options to maybe look at some special purchased insurance for organizations who'd like to attend but don't carry a typical liability rider that we require for organizations.
Supplemental. I just thought that yeah, they beautify that little town so nicely with all their artwork and so on. And it seems to me that if they're going to use our facility and they're hand in glove with us, I thought it'd be kind of a nice gesture on our part to look into it.
Adam CEO was has her hand up and then member.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah, I would suggest that we take the insurance conversation offline from the budget, because it's not really related, and there's some challenges around insurance, but generally our policy provides for extra protection for the township, which is really what our role is, but it's not really related to the grant. So let's hold that for another time.
Member Member Jansen, you have a comment there?
No, it was just around the mill and the capital, but I see that the request was zero, and that's why it carried over to zero on that side, so higher. Worse.
Is that, so just consensus on the 800 for the art club? Okay. So then if we can call member Cox back in, that would be great. So what we've done is so that the number equals what was in the original budget, I believe, according to the treasurer, was 27,200. We've put the difference in under contingency now. So, to member Brennan's question before, so we equate with what was the grand total that was allotted in the budget for grants. We've taken the difference between what council has now awarded, and given you a contingency of approximately 2,900, that if someone comes forward during the year, you have something to work. I can email around a final copy of this. If council would like an updated copy after the meeting, I can email it. So at this point, I'm going to switch gears. So at this point, I just need a to adopt the grants and read that the 2023 administration grants be approved, and that any item for which a conflict has been declared or deemed not to have been voted on or discussed by the individuals making the declaration. So it means you can vote on the motion as entire. Thank you very much, and we are officially through the grants.
Could we just request a file break? Okay.
we'll call the meeting back to order here. And where do we start off, Andrew? If admin and
Start off, and I guess it'll be the reddish orange tab, but it is section A, actually. Yeah, in the proposed budget, and it's section A. And these are, what we'll do is we'll go through the operating lines. We'll just go through page by page. Yeah, it's actually, but there is green at the top of this one. And it shows, it starts off with the revenues, and it's municipal residential levy. So that'll be the page we start on. We'll just wait till everybody gets there.
You're in the third tab of the binder, first letter. Yeah.
We're gonna wait. So, and what typically we would do now is we just go through page by page. Council can just take a brief look at the page. If they have any specific questions on a line item, you can stop, ask it. And then as we go through page by page, if there's questions, we'll field them as they go. And then when we get to the end of this particular handful of pages, then we'll look at the capital requests for administration.
Member Burkett. We're on the there's no screen on the top. Yes.
Yep.
We'll go down and we'll get to that, but we'll start. Member Minnings.
Thank you through the chair. Mr. Plunkett, villages and hamlets is at the bottom of this first page, correct?
Correct.
And so it shows an actual amount, nothing for the budget. Is that because the committee's now dissolved?
Mike's already on. It is, but it has been switched from being called villages panels to council special projects. So just a little bit above there, you'll see a line that says council special projects at 30,000.
Yeah, so I think we'll start still at the top and come down and we'll get to that one. Are you okay with that, Wanda? We'll get back. We'll come to that anyway.
I was going to say, I wouldn't typically go line by line. If we'll just look at the page. If anybody has any questions on this page, we'll answer them. And then once all those questions are answered.
Yeah, I think the one might interest the committee are the expenses, but I'll let Member Cox speak. Go ahead.
So where it says committee and board remuneration, there's nothing there. Is that included in the 2003? 203,000?
Oh, sorry. Yes, it is.
Okay.
That line really doesn't need to be there anymore. It's kind of there as a placeholder.
Okay. And the only other one I wanted to ask about is this, through the chair to Andrew, is this where we talk about the projects from the village and hamlets that we were assigned for 2022 and if they're being done or are they done and where we're going with those?
They can, for sure.
Or do we wait till that other area where you said the other day there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the list that's coming, for the projects that haven't been completed, I suppose we could do that tomorrow if that's possible during the capital of mostly the roads operations, if that's, and then we will make sure to include the villages and hamlets there.
Okay, so on conference expenses, Andrew, you've gone from an actual of 11,000 to 19,000. Is that because we're adding an extra conference there? Is that what I'm reading into that?
Turn my mic back on. But council agreed that you would be able to go to 2 conferences each. And that is that is there in the event that you do so.
Yeah, this is line number 3120. Expenses there. Okay, member Burkett, you have yours, and okay, member Brennan.
Yeah, my question relates to legal. There was an actual expenditure of 9,000 in 2022. That is line 3320. Knowing that we're going to need some money for dealing with annexation and legal costs, is that somewhere else?
If I can, through the chair to Member Brennan. Yes, this is the council specific. That line item would be in general.
Thank you.
And then we've got line 6140. That's the new villages and hamlets allocation.
Right.
Member Jansen. Just looking at what the actual costs were on a couple of items, lump sum CPP, and training expenses from last year. I noticed that we're projecting quite a lot higher costs this year. Is there a reason why we're projecting those higher costs?
I was gonna say the line item.
1162.
So the
It's, 1151, 1162, and 3150.
So I'll take the Canada pension one. One of those, the biggest reason is because we have more members of the council on here that are not exempt from independent. So we did our the ones that did leave us, we're no longer paying CPP. And CAO will answer the same question.
The training one is because we have a new council and we've done lots of orientation and training, right? For the day you speak. First year of a new council is always a higher training year.
Any other issues that the
If I can, Mr. Chair.
Member McIntyre.
One question on line 29 and 96 under administration expense. The signage of 78,000, and then there's 2 blanks beside it. Any explanation towards that?
All right, with great anticipation, let's turn the page.
But if
I'll
I
let Member
can-
Burkett jump in.
If I can, Mr.
Okay.
Chair, there will be a few instances here where you're going to see actuals that may not match up to budget items. Some of these items, especially when it comes to reserve transfers, they're not done until we finish year end. So we do them all at once. They don't happen every time we have a specific transaction, and they have not been done yet. So you will see that we're saying we're going to do a transfer and we haven't done it. That is because the financial, we just haven't booked the journal. And then there are a bunch more invoices that we're still waiting. Not everybody gets their invoices out quickly, so we typically don't cut off waiting for the end of the year invoices until the end of February.
Go ahead, Member Burkett.
Through the chair, line 2810 and your hydro. But now that I'm reading this, I would assume this hydro is for the whole building, correct? Not this on this side, is that correct?
Correct.
So as part of our new renovations, are we going to look at the furnace that we have on the side? Because I assume the other side of the building is heated gas, correct? We don't know. I'm not asking.
I personally don't know the answer to that
I
question.
think it
Sorry.
is, because I think Jim Hope.
Through the chair, yeah, so as the facilities group, we are undertaking a review of the entire facility from head to toe as part of the RFP that went out last year and awarded to Formworks. It does include HVAC components. Whether that includes an upgrade or not is still in the works, but they have been in through the entire facility to look at the HVAC. We've also performed energy audits. So energy audits look at directly how much energy you take to heat and keep the lights on, and how best can we reduce that to one payment.
So supplementary through the chair, if I may. So Eric, did they look at the furnace that's here? My understanding is there's two furnaces in this building. So this one's an electric furnace. So I'm just curious why we even have an electric furnace on this side when we have natural gas that's coming from the building.
And through the chair, so all the components of the HVAC system were reviewed by Formworks, and you are correct. There is two different furnaces in the area, and the selection of that was well before my time, but we are looking at during the improvements project and the opportunities to increase our energy efficiency.
So supplementary, if I may, through the chair. So ultimately, are you going to bring that back to council, or is that going to be staff's decision as to whether or not you change the furnace based on the amount of consumption? Like I realize now that this is the lights and everything plus the furnace, electric furnace on the side.
Through the chair, absolutely. The report will be delivered to council for review, and the architect will make recommendations for energy efficiency components of the project, as well as other massive concepts of the project as we go through the detailed design stage.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Member Cox. And then Member Minutes.
Just a supplemental through the chair, Derek. Interestingly enough, my neighbor furnace got hit by lightning. And when he replaced it, the person who replaced the natural gas furnace said to him, be prepared within the next 10 years. You will probably it'll be more efficient for you to have an electric furnace and a heat pump. And I was surprised at that because we'd all been told to switch everything over. So it'd be interesting to see what that audit said, if they come up with the same as that, or if that was just a story.
Thank you, Member Minutes.
Thank you through the chair. Line 0414 grants, it shows $50,000. We just went through the grants exercise and it was 30. So can you just clarify for me the two different line items?
So this particular one is not grants that we're giving, it's grants we're receiving. And that is, that's anticipated to be the economic development grant that we give to the county.
Of course, it's revenue. Thank you so much. Yes, and so then I'll ask my other silly question perhaps. Yep, so under the expenses, line 3156 and 3160, economic development and communications, both things really important. Can you just explain the amounts? And I'm not familiar with the spending for economic development, so just maybe a high level sentence or two. And then there hasn't previously been last year anyway in communications, but now there's 230,000. So if you can just share what's happening with those ones.
Certainly. So in the past, we didn't have a specific line for communications, but one to make it easier for Tracy, communications officer. We've actually separated an account so she can use that for all of the projects she does. And then first I'll go through the economic development line to let you know what's in there. It is 76,600 this year. That includes the 22,500 I mentioned earlier for Lake Country that does economic development for us, as well as the capital enablement program, digital marketing. We have $3,000 for the Aurelia CDC for regional tourism. Physicians recruitment is 20,000.
Seg Bay is in there.
The Seg Bay is also in there for 3,000. I think that if you add those up, it's probably.
Thanks for clarifying.
Member Cox.
Through the chair to Andrew. Andrew, is that amount from Lake Country their new request that's higher than last year?
It is, but I believe that's the same request as last year.
Because I was at a meeting and they were going to ask for an increase, and I didn't know if that was in there or not, or have they sent us anything?
What they sent me is what's in here.
Okay.
So
Maybe they decided not to do it because it was on the table.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Burkett. Go ahead, Adam, say if you can get on.
there. I just wanted to clarify. So Andrew went through what's in economic development. It's all grants or funds to others. So council was keen on an economic development strategy. There is no budget for that yet, and nor do we do any of our own economic development work. It's all funds that we're allocating to partner agencies. Just to be clear.
Go ahead, Member Burkett.
Thank you through the chair. So Andrew, just the 230,000 for communications, like how did we arrive at that number and what exactly are we spending it? I'm just curious.
That we do have that information. So website content development still there's about $8,000. Paid advertising for branding is about 10,000. Not exactly branding and creative solutions for Severn. So there's 23,000 there. The signage project itself is 148,000 of that 230. The signage program that we're doing. That is the bulk of it. And then there's website maintenance in support of 20,000. And then there's an additional 20,000 effectively for contingency for communications.
Okay, Member Jansen, we'll let the CEO speak and then Member Jansen, and I have a couple of questions.
My button doesn't work if Andrew's is on it. I just wanted to, for the newer members, we do have a signage strategy. Tracy will be reporting back on where we are probably in the spring sometime, but that's the bulk of the communications is where we're doing signage project.
Thank you, Member Jansen.
Okay, I see in the communications, part of that budget is advertising as well, and the amount of 10,000 advertising and branding. We do have line here at 3155 for promotion and public relations of 10,000, and then advertising line 3230 and the amount of 15,000. So I see within that, as well as the other amount that's within the 230, we've got $35,000 for promotion and advertising, and I see in the last year we only spent 7,000.
So the general advertising line that's not public promotion is the budget that I would use if I need to advertise a land sale or living improvement or general corporate stuff. Then HR stuff, so job postings, that sort of catches all the rest of the corporate advertising.
And the promotions and public relations is more items that the administration may do to, other forms of, maybe events for staff, it may be events for things as well. Yeah. Oh, and flags and things, just some other stuff. The additional, typically our communications budget was pretty lean in the past. It was one of council's strategic plan priorities, and that is one of them.
Thanks. Okay. A couple questions on revenue and then one on expenses. So the POA, that's from the traffic tickets, police. So it's going down. Line, 314 at the top. POA, police offensive act.
And it has gone down. It continues to. The actuals continue to fall, and I don't know if that was directly related to COVID for a while. I thought it would have made a bit of a better comeback for 2023, and it has not.
I'm just surprised with a lot of complaints on speeding, and you think they correlate with speeding tickets.
And maybe they're just not giving enough tickets, because it does correlate to speeding tickets given.
Madam CEO.
Or it's a court backlog issue, right? People go to courts and get their fees reduced and all of those things, and that's been severely back. That's also probably an impact.
And then on the same section, line 881, land sales. So that's revenue for the township, but that was property that we sold down near Matchlash Bay, but it has to stay into a fund that's used in that area. Maybe Callison for road improvement there. Is that how I read that?
Correct. So, when council agreed to sell those, it was Trader Cowan lots, the three of them there. It was in the council motion that we had to put in the same reserve that IPO sitting at this 8,000 that will be carried forward from the old take contribution that was pre-evaluation. So, that they would be brought, that whole sum would be brought back for council's review when the transportation master plan was completed to determine what would happen with the road.
Thank you. And then my last question is on the expenses side, 2220. Building, property maintenance. The budget was 75,000, the actual was 37,000, we're budgeting 85,000. So we're gonna more than double last year's actual.
If I can, through the chair, I'm not sure if we're not missing a couple of items in there that, I'm surprised the actual is that low right now. I'll have to look at the actual, and I do know that typically that actual will be much higher than it is right now. We do have we are adding a snow removal contract as well as, some storage requirements that we do need for the building. They're around 20,000, but they will cost additional amounts for 2023.
Mr. Burke?
Through the chair, if I can add a little bit to that, I was pulling up my notes as well. Yeah, so the admin office here is currently under control performed by staff. I think council things nice. Even saw myself giving a bit of a hand to some of our staff to make sure we're open at 8:30. That is something we want to control, that risk and liability, and make sure that our facility is ready for staff to enter the facility in its clean shape. So that's a good chunk of what.
And my last question is at the bottom, 3366 Severn Sound remedial action plan. Do we pay another fund as well? Like that's 108, but in your budget preview is 118. Is there two different accounts there? Or?
So if I can, through the chair, there are two different accounts. The other component is source water protection, which is included in the water rate curves or the water expense. So that is why the 108 is here, and the additional approximately 11,000 is included in the water expense.
Yeah, I'm not on that committee till Monday, but I thought I'd find it today. Okay, thank you. Member Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Andrew. Andrew, on that, the lines that we asked on the economic development and communication, can you just note to flip us out an email with those on it? I couldn't get them all written down with the amounts, just so I have that background on it. So I'm asking for the promotion, public relations, economic development, and communication. If you don't mind, please. Thank you.
It's great. So I think we still will carry on and we'll aim to close at 11. Member Jansen.
Thank you. Through the chair, the line item 3360 consultants. We're budgeting $40,000, and I know during our strategic plan talks we have talked about some possible consulting around an economic development plan. Would that cover that all?
My mic was off again. 20,000, because we are looking at updating the wage and remuneration study again for 2023 to make sure we're keeping it up to date with council.
Thank you. So just to clarify, an economic development strategy is not yet in the budget. We didn't have your strategic priorities when we put the draft together. When we bring the strat plan back, we'll be suggesting some budget which will come out of reserves.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the line item in revenue 0861 and 62, those are the reserves. I know we talked about them earlier today. When it comes to investing that money through possibly that one investment, do we need as counselors to ask that to have that investment firm come to speak with us?
So we don't, we'll reach out to them. They're a group that's, they're through AMO. So we'll reach out to them and they're quite happy to come and do a presentation to council. Thank you.
We don't have to cut off right at 11. If we can get through admin, that's probably good. I've left lots of buffer to be where we need to be. So let's try and aim to get through admin and then start fresh tomorrow.
We certainly can. The reason that the greatest increase there is our new financial system, and once it's in place, it will cost us about an additional 100,000. The other 100,000 that's already there is the software maintenance cost for all the other programs that we're already currently using.
Can you comment on some of the items scrolling down there, Andrew? Your mic on there.
Certainly. So we have a lot of these are, well, you'll notice that there's capital expenditures. We'll actually look at those directly in a couple of minutes, and that's 220,000. There are 871,000, which is transfers to reserves. Part of the levy for a long time is 400,000 from administration transferred to reserves, and again for capital purposes. The other portion of that is the gas tax funding. And so then it comes in and be transferred directly to the gas tax reserve. Spend money we draw it up in that. Next line item is the transfer to the reserve fund for interest. So because we're generating more revenue, there is a component that relates to the reserve funds, and that gets transferred to the reserve funds. If it's the development charges reserve fund, for example, or the gas tax reserve fund, they also generate revenue, so we transfer their portions of the revenue into those reserves. Next, we have the transfer of 1.1 million, and that is the OMPF funding that we transfer to the capital reserve. And the 1.6 million is compared to the 1.3 million. So that is the transfer from the levy to the capital reserve for effectively for the asset management. And most of the other items they're smaller. If anybody else has some questions on that page. And you will notice that across the board, you'll probably notice that insurance has gone up. It has, unfortunately, our policies come in and it is about, I believe, 8% higher than actual. Maybe not as bad as it could have been, but it's not something we look forward to. Our insurance still seems to be reasonable compared to a lot of our neighbors. It's knock on wood. We're still doing okay there.
So Andrew, right at the very bottom, can you explain to the committee on how BIA works?
Sure. So if I can, so the BIA, if they have their own separate tax levy, and there's a specific area related to cold water for the businesses. So all the businesses and the commercial properties within that allotted area are required to pay into the BIA. They generate $30,000. They requested to generate $30,000. So we will charge them, those individual businesses, prorated portion of that $30,000, and then they use the $30,000 to pay for their own events and advertising, promotion, or events that they do. And there is no impact to the
residents separate for these amounts. It's just we need to be factored. We are effectively their treasurer, and they are required to be reported in our financial statements. And so that is why we include them in the budget.
So you're a check and balance for the BAA.
Yes.
We can turn the page.
So at the top of that page is certainly all the where the BIA is expected to spend their 30,000. The bottom of this first page showed their revenues of 30,000. The next section is the elections. And luckily, there's no election this year, so there's very few items in there.
I have a question.
Yep.
To Allison. So the actual came in at 83,000, say roughly, but we're budgeting 30,000 a year. Is that an area we can reduce that? I think we put 30 in for 4 years for 120. But in reality, it's 83,000. There's savings.
My recommendation would be to leave it for a couple of years, and then I will start getting estimates when we get to five that will work like with costs. So if we're gonna reduce it, I would, or adjust it, I would wait until to do so. Because one thing that did jump substantially this election was the cost of advertising for even just basic statutory ads. And right, if it was to, I need to know what the start charging, but I think that's the cost because of inflation. So just give it a little round so that it does.
Thank you. Member Minnings, I think you had your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I had the similar question, so that's an amount that's expected to sit there and then increase incrementally until we use it. Yeah, and I that was one of the things is, sorry, so I see it does go into an election reserve, so there should be nothing charged against it for the next 4 years.
Correct. And the reason we do the 30,000 on an annual basis instead of it effectively smooths those costs over the 4-year cycle instead of it not all going to one. It is the policing revenues and the policing costs. So, I mean, the policing revenue is simply the component of the tax bill that we charge for policing, and the costs are what they are the invoice that we receive from provincial police to cover the costs of policing. There is a small surplus from the previous year, which we brought in to reduce the levy back by 40,000 for policing.
Okay, and then further down with it, just to bring everybody up, we have a policing office up in West Shore.
Yes, we do. We're familiar with it. We've reached out to them a few times. The rent is actually relatively inexpensive and continues to be. We have reached out to them to make sure that they're using it. Now you might add the corner from there. So I do see the police presence. So they definitely are using it.
Yeah, that was my question to Ms. Wanted whether it's being used at all. I guess.
Thank you, Chair. So my experience is it's being used occasionally. I do see police cars in there, but I'm not asked there often enough to say whether or not, but we do, from my campaigning, et cetera, I do appreciate, and the residents do, a police presence, because we just have a very, compact residential areas. I'm happy to have.
Thank you. Member Burkett.
Thank you through the chair. So just to add to that, they do have a log book in the office. If someone did question, and they're more than willing to show how many times they are in that building. They are late in the night. They're there as well. But it is well used.
Thank you. Carrying on, Andrew.
We can, if there's no more questions on that page, we can move to the next page, which has got
Member Cox will jump in there.
Okay, so it's line
1120.
120, part-time salaries and wages under bylaw expenditures. Last year, we had 2 students. This year, I'm gathering that we're getting 1 person for a longer period, and is it something we want? I know we talked about because of the short-term rentals, but is it necessary for the length? I'd like some rationalization on this.
Go ahead, Allison.
Thank you. So, council, those that were on council time may recall my end of summer report that came, with the September committee. That was a summer review. Went over the pros and cons that we had of having the summer students where they were able to be out on the weekends. That said, because they were first year summer students and there's a limited amount of work they can do from an orders perspective, it fell back a lot on our full-time officer to be issuing orders. They did the legwork, but at the end of the day, the orders and all the stuff that we processed through our office officer. What the recommendation coming out of that September corporate services report is to hire a 8-month seasonal position that would go from May to October. The other issue we had is that because they're students, they were not around for September long weekend because they obviously are prioritized return to school, secondary. So we missed them for 1 long weekend. They always have to go out in the team because they're students. But they were able to patrol on the weekends and they were out later into the evening. They do not respond. It should make it clear even if we have an officer that's grounded for the time they still would not be out through midnight hours. And if there is a serious issue going on a property, that is still an OPP matter and not a bylaw enforcement. So it's entirely up to council what service level they want to set with respect to this. Last year we budgeted, as you can see on the actuals there, substantially lower for having 2 summer students versus 79,000. That includes the benefits that would be for the 8-month officer. So again, this is entirely up to what council wants to see happen on the
A supplemental for member Cox.
Yeah, so supplemental, we have 38.5 in here and all the rest are benefits. Because it said 79,000. In 8 months.
It's a positive, if they're considered part-time, they may or may not join OMERS now. Part-time employees can now join OMERS if they have the option. If they do so, then certainly the township has our contribution to that plan. And I've included the benefits. It's entirely possible that if they are considered part-time, they wouldn't have part of their benefit.
And member Mennings and then member Burkett.
Thank you. I'm happy to see part-time salaries and wages in this line. I did see through the chair, Allison, I saw your presentation online, and I think the recommendation was to not have summer students this particular summer. And I know it's a lot of work to manage and supervise and train, etc. I think the presence is something that the residents really need, and we like to see that, even if it is a very temporary opportunity and they're not ticketing, etc. But when I look at the revenues for bylaw, they're not high anyway. So I wouldn't expect summer students to do that. I also realize the value in providing experiences to our next generation and to those who are pursuing post-secondary education to have opportunities like this while they're living at home, to have really meaningful job experience on their resumes and their applications, because hopefully maybe one day we'll attract them here. So that's what I would say. It's a small amount of money. And if it's possible, I would support that.
Thank you, member Burkett.
Thank you through the chair, and thank you, member Mennings. But I would like, and I'm not opposed to having a part-time bylaw enforcement officer. We struggled last year, for the benefit of the new members of council. We struggled with the 2 young bylaw officers. They were out giving tickets where they shouldn't be giving tickets. So I'm not sure how Allison, you're going to I'm not sure what they're going to do. So I need clarity before I can support it as to what is this new temporary bylaw enforcement officer going to do. So the last thing I need are the phone calls that I receive, you know, places they shouldn't have been. And I seen them coming out of South Sparrow Lake Road at 5 o'clock. I'm sure what they're doing back there. And then they were back at Severn Falls. I bought them dinner. They were quite surprised when they saw me. So I'm not sure what they were doing back there. Maybe ticketing cars that were off the parking lot. I didn't want to say anything at the time, but now that we're having a discussion about bylaw, I need clarity as to what their job description.
Madam Clerk, go ahead.
Absolutely. So the students go where we receive complaints. So that's how our bylaw enforcement. We did, and we recognize we have an issue with parking bylaw, particularly on Gray Street that we need to review, which is what triggered up a bunch of complaints right off the start of the summer. That is on the Director of Public Works and I's agenda to do before we get into summer to bring that back to council. That said, up in the Severn Falls area, we have an area every year that pops up with people who are parking their boats and trailers on the side roads overnight. Every year we have to go up and issue tickets, issue warnings, and end up programming. So that's probably part of the reason why they were up at Severn Falls, was keeping an eye on that issue. They go to Washego, they go to Port Severn, they do the Main Street and Coldwater. So they're for two officers, they were split all over the neck of the woods. They also do follow-ups on existing open files if we need just inspections done. To just say, because we only have the one full-time officer, it's kind of lets them go left on Monday and lets the other group go right. So in the after hours, so that they can cover more ground in the shorter period of time. The reason why we're pursuing a full MLEO officer for 8 months rather than just the 4 month summer student program, and I think it's important to know that there is a definite difference in the time there, is that summer students don't have the ability to lay clean and clear rooms, property standard rooms. It might be once we had one for 2 or 3 years down the road and they've accomplished more and seen a bit more, that they would be able to do so. And they do that in other areas where they have different levels of summer students, junior and senior students. But given that we had first year summer students, they want that level of experience, we're comfortable with them this year. And being around for the follow-up as well. Whereas 8 months typically is the limit. So again, this is entirely council's decision. If council would like to just pursue summer students again for this year, then we go down that path.
It's a supplementary, if I may. I'm okay with it. I just don't want our new, if council sees to hire the temporary one, I don't want he or she to go looking for trouble. As long as it's driven by complaint, I'm happy. But I don't want her driving around the neighborhood around township looking for stuff.
Yeah, Madam
Stuff
Clerk,
that she
and
shouldn't be.
Member Brennan. Thank you.
So one thing that did happen during COVID, and a couple of years ago, we were showing the statistical difference on the monthly bylaw enforcement reports that we saw an average of about 3% over the summer months. I mean, by summer for us, I deem it to be like the May long weekend, so sometimes just after the September long weekend. We definitely have a busier period and a quiet period. Quiet period, we do not need a second officer at all. But given the seasonal nature of our area, our officer needs some help during summer months if they are to respond in the timely manner that our residents.
Thank you. Member Brennan, and then I have a question.
Yeah, the idea of the 8 month contract appeals to me. I've said this before to council, I said it again, using students in those positions to me is just not right. I have a problem. I have my own 4 kids, and I've worked with enforcement relative conservation officers in the past. I've worked with park security, with the Ministry of Natural Resources. And yes, you don't want them doing anything dangerous, but that's what happens when you run into some jerk out there. And this town, there's plenty of people with enforcement background. They're living all over the place. I think we have more retired OPP than anywhere else in the province. We have people who have skills that we can use properly in enforcement, and people who know how to handle the situation. it'll come up in the, so that's how I feel on that.
Member Cox.
Yeah, through the chair to Allison. So if it's only summer months, why wouldn't it be a 6-month program?
So it could be 6 months.
Yeah.
It's entirely up to council.
Because if we don't need them
If
till
you'd like
May.
to shrink that to be 6 instead of 8, then that's fine.
Well, I was just thinking, you said basically the end of May to
Yeah,
after the Labor Day weekend, so that's like 6 months.
So
Yeah,
6
member
months,
Bennings.
6 months would be sufficient to cover the worst of our super busy period.
Go ahead, Member Jennings.
Uh,
Thank you through the chair. So with the summer students, I agree with the conversations. They're not bylaw officers. So summer students do education and training and awareness and all of those things to support bylaw. I fully support a second part-time bylaw officer for as long as we can. And I'm okay with the 8 months because I'm not even sure if one person, if it's, I'm not convinced it's a one-person job for a normal 12 months of the year, knowing that they don't work evenings and weekends or traditionally. So my question to you is this additional contract for part-time opportunity, would it work complementary hours or alternate hours to what the current full-time bylaw officer works so that we have or we're gearing towards 24/7 bylaw coverage?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this position would work evenings and weekends. Yeah. I don't think we're gonna get to the point where the bylaw would be most of the overnight, but it would work evenings.
Member McIntyre.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question to the clerk. I somewhat agree with the 6-month period. However, if we had one, use the expression, more mature part-time bylaw officer, would they do follow-up files on our present bylaw officers' work? For instance, if there was a property standards issue, could this person have authority to go back and say, you were issued some notice and you haven't done anything? Is firstly, and just as part 2 to the question, do you think the new bylaw officer, who I've never met and I don't know who that, that person should have some contribution in the selection of a temporary bylaw officer? Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Thank you for the questions. So with respect to, so forgive me if I, with respect to the recruitment side of it, typically the actual officer themselves are not involved. Then other line staff would be involved in recruitment. That would be the management resources of myself. So, and forgive me, I've forgotten your first question. The follow-up. So yes, they would absolutely be able to do property follow-ups. So that would be, I'd imagine it would probably be an hour and a bit overlap between the full-time officer leaving before the end of the day and the new one being on. So they have time to keep their files and talk about what's to be done for evening. I'm gonna have their property file to be done because sometimes people don't get them until 5 or so at night. Then that officer would have the ability to.
Thank you, Member Jansen and Member.
I had a supplement.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to agree that through the chair, that a more mature person rather than having 2 students would suit me better. I think that people have a tendency to not pay a lot of attention to the younger person. So a more full-time, part-time, mature person, I think would suit our bill on this one.
Thank you, Member Jansen and Member Burkett.
Just to add my voice to this discussion here, I did meet the 2 students last year, and they were very friendly in their approach. However, I was subject to one of their tickets that went out. That's no problem. It did get resolved quite quickly. I guess my concern is whether we have a 6-month or an 8-month individual joining our team as bylaw officer. What's our plan for retention? It would be seasonal. How do we ensure that person to work? Would there be an incentive that would be created? That way we've got some continuity rather than every year trying to find a brand new person.
Madam Clerk, if you have the comments on that.
And I don't know if the answer to that is myself or unfortunately our manager or our CAO. I've done the seasonal full-time, at Leo. Piece with the country. It was very successful. Luckily, just due to the personality of the individual that we hired, they did fit for particular life, and they were very easy to come back year after year after year. So sometimes it's the person. On the incentive piece, I'm going to let the CAO speak to that.
Yeah, I'm not actually going to speak to that specifically. I'm just going to refocus council. This is about budget. We're getting a bit far afield into HR matters. Those are staff and management issues. They're not council. I appreciate your interest, but they're not council matters. They're focus on service levels and the budgets.
Thank you, Member Burkett.
Thank you to the chair. I don't think I'm allowed to ask the question. Can I though?
Yeah, I think, go ahead.
So I'm curious if council is going to hire, whether it's 6 months or 8 months, is this person going to get a truck? They're going to get the same truck. Yes. So in their travels, and I don't know, I guess this is an HR question. If they see a bag of garbage, you think they can stop and just throw the truck on the roadway? Or is that something that HR needs to discuss?
Thank you for that question.
I'm gonna, if I can please.
Yes.
I'm just gonna say that one might fall back to my operating.
Member Jansen.
I'm not sure how to raise it, but in the interest of time, as I did think we were done at 11, I do have another. Go back 11. So I would need to agree with this.
I just have a comment that I think the need is there for enforcement, especially in Ward 1. And you mentioned Severn Falls, and we have Doug Smith Drive, which is a 4-hour parking, and it's almost impossible to do that. And I'm happy to see that the one position will overlap the other one, and and there's 2-hour parking on Earl Haid, so they're busy there, and that's a problem area is Doug Smith Drive. So I guess we just have to see what we want to put in the budget for 6 months versus 8 months and see what the difference is. If we can get this line item agreed to, we can move on. So Member Cox, what do you think on 6 or 8, and what impact is that on the budget, Andrew?
My concern isn't just the impact on the budget. My concern is, do we need them? And for 8 months, I think it's a 6 month. It's the summer where we get the nailing after a long weekend in May, and pretty much by after Labor Day, it quiets right down. So I would be more for 6 months.
Member Burkett had your sign up there.
Well, there goes. Sorry, through the chair. So, like, I'm in favor of 6 months. My only concern, and I know from hiring the 2 summer students, I think they were the only 2 applicants. So we may not be able to find, if we don't find a 6 month, someone that would be extended 8 months.
Member Minnings.
Yeah, I just want to make a point, state that bylaw is not only required through the summer months. I've had a huge spike in calls since the Lake Couchiching has frozen regarding parking, etc., fish hut, snowmobile concerns by residents. It's kept me super busy, and bylaw has been involved in that too. So I would do whatever, like, I do think bylaw is not just a summer concern in the township.
Thank you. Member Brennan.
Yeah, I favor the 8 month. I think we need more, not less. There is always follow-up when you're dealing with transactions like and time is needed to clean things up, and I just think that extra couple of months probably puts our overall program in a better step. Thank you.
Okay, can we just do a straw poll, 6 or 8, starting with Mr. McIntyre? I would go with 8.
I would go with 8.
So I think we can go to the next line now. Now we're still,
Mr. Chair, did we want to stop here at the end of bylaw for the day and then pick up tomorrow, just because I'm aware of Councillor Jansen's
Yeah.
thing, and then there's the funeral that.
That's interesting. I can, yeah,
so what, so Andrew, you owe us an explanation of line 3156 for the economic development, what's included in that. And then we're going to get a new page on the grants. And
Yes.
we're going to meet tomorrow at 9 o'clock.
and I was just gonna say, council, there is a couple of pages left for administration. One is the animal control, which I don't know if there'd be a lot of questions on. And there's the garbage services that we have on here, which is just the cost of, quickly, it's just the revenues we get for garbage bag tags and the cost of sending them out. They offset one another, and the rest of the admin items here are just county taxes and school board taxes. You'll notice there's no budget lines there. That's just simply because I haven't put them in there, but they don't impact our levy at all. They are just placeholders in our statement so that we have them. So the rest of the pages in the admin budget, we really likely don't need to go through. And if somebody does have any questions, we can respond to them in the morning. But maybe tomorrow morning we'll start off with the administration capital, unless somebody has some specific questions on the last couple of pages.
Member Burkett.
Through the chair, and just on page.
There's no page number.
Okay, so the G 912103 W365, right at the very top of the page, where it says Forest County expense. What's MMGE?
Managed forest.
So what does that?
That is one of, so just like there's farmland gets a 0.25% rate, managed forest also gets that same farm. And we do have, so we have properties that are set as managed forest versus properties that are set as farm.
So this may not be the right form, but the 300 acres that we had harvested quite a few years ago, we received $60,000. I don't want it to get lost. I know that the new, is that something in here that?
Yeah, it's not related.
Where can I speak for that? I'll speak to it in Derek's presentation.
There you go.
All right, thank you.
Member Brennan. Who gets seconded by, moved by Mr. Councillor Brennan, second by Councillor McIntyre, all in favor? Carried.